Add-on solutions. Add-on desire.
Hello viewers, welcome to our daily news analysis session. I am Lokesh Penagunda and today's topics will include topics from The Hindu. Our first topic of today, the anatomy of the ceasefire. Let's see the ceasefire agreement in detail, its background and what will be the way forward to this. So first, ceasefire agreement. In 2003, we had a ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan's prime ministers. So after the ceasefire agreement, there was no violations in 2004, 2005 and 2006. And the violations again started from 2007. And in 2020, there has been a record 5,100 violations from the Pakistani side. So this is highest in 19 years, that is since 2002. And it has left nearly 30 dead and 130 injured. So in this context, the new agreement which was signed last week by the India and Pakistan DGMOs is significant. It's significant because of these following reasons. It is first signed by DGMOs because what happened was earlier, though there were many discussions on ceasefire agreements and ceasefire limitations, these talks were generally carried out in back channel and by lower level officials. So having a talk and having an agreement between DGMOs is significant. And second, this is seen with the political will. So even last week, Mr. Imran Khan, who is the Prime Minister of Pakistan, has said that India and Pakistan has only one issue, that is with Kashmir. And he seems to be interested in stopping bloodshed at line of control. And this agreement has clearly mentioned the date from which this agreement will come to start. That is 24th February 2021. So these advantages, the advantages of ceasefire agreement. These advantages we have clearly explained in the last session. Please go to our yesterday's video, that is 2nd February. So in basically these advantages will be, we will be having a safer and stable borders with Pakistan. It nulls the idea of two-front war, because what happened was in the last year there has been numerous number of ceasefire violations by the Pakistani army, and we have to send our troops, we have to give a reply to these violations of Pakistan. So what happened was there was troops on both sides of the LOC, that is the LOC with China and the LOC with Pakistan. So there was a speculation that there might be a possibility of two-front war, that is with China and Pakistan together with India. So with this agreement, this nulls the speculation of the two-front war. Also, now that the ceasefire agreement has been signed and the stability in the border will be established, the troops who are concentrated near the Pakistan's LOC, these troops can be sent back to Aksai Chin area or any other area with bordering China. So let's look into the brief history of the border and CFLs, that is ceasefire lines with Pakistan. In 1948, we have witnessed Pakistan supporting the tribal militias to capture the northern parts of the Jammu and Kashmir, and they successfully have captured some areas of the Kashmir, which we are calling now as Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And we had a brief war with Pakistan then. And in 1949, an agreement was signed, which was Karachi Agreement. It was signed under the aegis of UN, that is United Nations. And after the signing of this agreement, a new institution was created, that is UNMOGIP, that is United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan. The main function of this UNMOGIP is to monitor the ceasefire line along LOC. So what happened was, again we have a 1965 war with Pakistan, and the ceasefire line which we had created earlier in the 1948 and 1949 wars, this ceasefire line has changed a little bit. But after the Tashkent Agreement, whatever the status of the borders, whatever the status of the ceasefire line, it was restored. However, in the 1971 war, it was also called as Bangladesh Liberation War. During this war, what happened was Pakistan was lost, and Pakistan's we taken some of its territories, and there has been minor changes in the line of control in the Jammu and Kashmir side. So after the 1917 war, we have seen 1972 Shimla Agreement between Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and Prime Minister Bhutto of Pakistan. This Shimla Agreement was also called as Suchetgarh Agreement. This is called as such because Suchetgarh was a village near the line of control where the Shimla Agreement was discussed and where it took place. This 1972 agreement brought a new ceasefire line, thus renaming the new ceasefire line as line of control. So what happened is in 1948 war, we had a clash with Pakistan, and a border between Pakistan and India is named ceasefire line. But after 1971 war, this ceasefire line has been changed, and now a new ceasefire line is created, and this new ceasefire line is called line of control. So you can deduce from this is this UNMOGIP was earlier mandated to monitor the ceasefire at the CFL. Now there is no CFL. So this institution's framework has become irrelevant as there is no CFL in the first place. Also, as this institution is not even a party to the Shimla Agreement. So the new ceasefire agreement. In 2003, there was a telephone call between DGMOs of India and Pakistan. This telephone call reiterated that we should follow the 1971 ceasefire line. So technically, the 2001 ceasefire line, which is based on 2003 ceasefire line, is actually based on 1971 ceasefire line, because the 2003 agreement is based on 1971, and now the 2021 agreement is based on 2003. So thus technically the entire agreement is based on 1971 ceasefire line. What's needed? Though the ceasefire agreement has been signed between India and Pakistan, though there are no relevant provisions, there is no rules and norms to enforce it. So maybe tomorrow Pakistan might not accept these conditions and may start again violations of this ceasefire. So we need an agreement which will have clear-cut rules, which will have norms, which will have a enforcement and legal legislature behind it. So that is needed. This can be taken in the context of Karachi Agreement. In the Karachi Agreement of 1949, there were clear provisions on the management of CFL, which is missing in the 2021 agreement. So way forward will be whatever bad channel diplomacy which helped us for ceasefire agreement in the 2021, this should be continued, and we should have a legal backing of the ceasefire documents signed between India and Pakistan. Let's come to the second article, reviving the Iran deal. Iran deal we have explained yesterday. This is also called as Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It was signed between Iran and P5+1, that is permanent 5 members of United Nations, plus Germany along with European Union. So today's article mentions why it is important to renegotiate it as quickly as possible. First, it says that Iran has been compliant to JCPOA. This Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, what it brought was, it brought certain limitations on Iranian enrichment of uranium, and Iran has been 100% compliant as per IAEA reports. IAEA is International Atomic Energy Agency. Energy Agency. So its main function is to promote peaceful use of nuclear technology and to prevent any nuclear technology which could be used for harmful purposes. This is the first reason why the Iran deal should be renegotiated and it should be back. Second reason is it will bring stability to the region. Now what happened is, as the USA has unilaterally left the deal and started putting pressure on Iran by having new sanctions on it, so there is a instability in the region because it not only brought sanctions, it also started putting maximum pressure by sending its naval ships near the Iran's borders. So by having an agreement, we can bring stability to this region. Third reason, Iran supported USA to unseat, that is unpower, Taliban after the 2001 attacks. What happened was in 2001 there was 9/11 attacks on USA, which was the Twin Towers attack. So as these attacks were supported by the Taliban, USA wanted to unseat the Taliban from its power in the Afghanistan. So to do this, Iran supported USA, and there was a sense of common comradeship between Iran and USA then. But what happened was, after the new administration, which is the Bush administration, when George Bush became the president of USA in 2003, what he said was, Iran, North Korea and Iraq are axis powers. So he again started with sanctions. He again started lambasting the Iran regarding its various violations in the international arena. 5. Fifth reason is there is a need for continuity in policy making, because even the JCPOA agreement, which was signed after various levels of discussions and meetings, though the agreement as such was successful in many areas, the United States again left out of this deal. So there is a need for continuity in policy making to ensure that there is peace and stability in Iran-USA and in Iran-Middle East relations. What is the urgency to have a renegotiation? So the urgency comes from the President Rouhani's end of presidentship. So Mr. Rouhani, who has been a moderate, who is willing to negotiate and who has signed the JCPOA agreement in 2015, his second term is coming to an end and he can't stand for the third term. So now when he is still the president till June 2021, there are more chances of having a comprehensive deal between Iran and the Western powers. Second, after General Soleimani being killed in Iraq, there was a huge protest against the United States in the Iran. So there is a negative sentiment among the Iranian citizens, against having any deal. Also, due to the immense sanctions, there is inflation, there is GDP contraction, and combined with these problems, there is also COVID pandemic impact, which has seen 60,000 Iranian citizens losing their lives and nearly 16 lakh being infected. And also recently, pro-Iran fighters in Syria are being targeted or being bombed by both United States and Israel. So as more and more negative sentiment is coming up in the Iranian citizens and in the Iranian administration, it is better to have a deal as soon as possible. Next, the third article of today's discussion is spectrum auction. In this article, it says that Center got 77,000 crores in the spectrum sale. So what is spectrum and what is the use of spectrum? So devices such as cell phones require signals to connect from one to another. So as now everyone is having a cell phone, they need signals to connect from one to another. These signals are carried through airwaves, which must be sent at designated frequencies. So what are frequencies? Frequencies are wavelengths. So in this image, you can see, let's see this as an example. These are the calls coming out, and these are the persons who wants to receive the calls. Let's say this is the frequency. If the frequency is the same as the receiver's frequency, if the frequency of call is same as other receiver's frequency, there might be a confusion. It might lead to one person getting some other person's calls. So what we need is different frequencies for different persons. So let's see this. In this condition, though the calls are coming, the frequency takers, the frequency receivers are having different wavelengths. One is small, one is medium, and one is large. So whenever the calls are coming, as per the particular frequencies, these calls will be received by persons of the same frequency. That is, if it's a bigger ball, only the receiver having bigger ball frequency will be able to receive it, and other frequencies will be blocked by filter circuits, which will be present in everyone's mobiles. So what happens is, if everyone uses the same frequency, there might be interference of the calls, and there may be loss of signal, there may be loss of quality. So different types of frequencies are required for different applications. As the union government owns all the publicly available assets, including the airwaves, the government will be able to sell it to those who need it. By selling these airwaves, the government gets funds. So what happens now is, the government through Department of Telecom, which is under the Ministry of Communications, auctions the spectrum, and those who wants to buy the spectrum, they have to bid. Those who bid the highest for a particular frequency will get it, and they can use it for their own purposes. And in the recent, we have seen an expansion of the number of cell phones, internet users. So there is more need for frequency to these companies. So these airwaves, which we've discussed now, are called spectrum, which is subdivided into bands and having various frequencies. All these airwaves are sold for a certain period. So this auction, when a particular company buys this frequency, it will be only for a specific period. In this case, it is 20 years. So what will be the benefits the government will be getting by selling this spectrum? It will get funds. So as we've seen here, government is getting nearly 77,800 crores for selling part of spectrum. It is important in the context of government losing much of its revenue due to the COVID pandemic last year. And now that there is huge fiscal deficit, getting funds by selling spectrum is a very good idea. And also by selling spectrum, there will be faster and continued connectivity to the users. The next article of today's discussion is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha TV being merged under the banner of Sansar TV. So first look into what Lok Sabha TV and Rajya Sabha TV does. Lok Sabha TV was established in 2006. Rajya Sabha TV was established in 2011. The main functions of this news channels is to live telecast the sessions of the houses going on. So why live discussion, a live telecast of the sessions of houses is important? It has an educational purpose. As viewers would know what's happening in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha and what are the bills being passed, they get to know various legislations and various rules being passed by the houses. It will have a good effect on the parliamentarians, because now the MPs of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha know the entire country is watching them live. So there is a idea that this will help them, this will make them be more productive, this will prevent unnecessary disruptions in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. This will also be helpful to having a taking a informed decision. So what happens is, when the viewers know what's happening in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, they will be able to take an informed decision while they are voting in the elections. So there were two channels, Lok Sabha TV and Rajya Sabha TV, and these two channels are merged into one and renamed as Sansad TV. And Mr. Ravi Kapoor, who is a retired IAS officer, is appointed as the first CEO. So why merger of these two channels is needed? There was a committee, it was a 6-member committee led by Prasar Bharati chairman. The name of the chairman is A. Surya Prakash. This committee has recommended that there is a need to merge the both channels. It said that by merging you will have numerous benefits. What are the benefits? It removes duplication. Now there are two channels, so there will be two editors, there will be a need for different buildings for these channels to work with, there will be different staff for both these channels. So by merging these two into one, there will be only one editor and it can happen in one building, and the same staff can work more productively for the both channels into the combined one. This is the first reason. Second, as more resources we have, we can better concentrate these resources. So earlier what happened is, there are two channels, so we have to fund both these channels, and there was duplication of efforts. So now there is less duplication, there are more funds to spare. These funds can be used to increase the quality of the channel and its content. Third reason is, the sessions of the houses generally happens 100 days in a year. So remaining part of the year, these channels will be generally idle. So now there will be less idle time and the channels will be more productive. Fourth, what will happen if both the sessions are at the same time? If both sessions are at the same time, we can use the Doordarshan channel to live telecast one of the houses proceedings. The next article of today's discussion is Back to the Future. The economy has emerged from the woods, but challenges loom. So what this article mainly talks about is, during the last year, we have witnessed COVID-19 and COVID-19 induced lockdown. During this lockdown, there were numerous closed downs of the businesses. There were no transport facilities. There were no manufacturing. There was huge job losses. And as a result of the entire lockdown, the GDP has contracted 24% in the April to June period of 2020, which is quarter 1 of 2021. And even in the Q2, which will be July to the next 3 months, we have seen a contraction in the GDP. So what is recession? Recession is a term which is used if there are two consecutive quarters of economic decline. So as we've told you, in Q1, there is 24% negative growth. This negative growth or negative impact is called a contraction. And even in Q2, there is a contraction in GDP. So having two contractions of GDP at consecutive quarters is called as recession. Now in the third quarter, which is October to December, we have witnessed a GDP growth of 0.4%. So now that there is growth, we have come out of recession, which is two consecutive quarters of contraction. Why and what contracted during lockdown? So in this we can see in the quarter 1 of financial year 21, which is April to June, various sectors have witnessed contraction. Industries have witnessed nearly 38% contraction, services 20%, manufacturing 39%, and trade and hotels minus 47%. There was only one growth, that is, there was only growth in only one sector, that is agriculture. And in this image, you can see the COVID impact on various countries. In the quarter 1 of 21, which is April to June, we have seen there is minus 23.9% growth. That is, there is nearly 24% contraction in the Indian GDP. And in UK, the contraction is 21%. And in these countries, the contraction is in these figures. But China stood next with a 3.2% positive growth. China is the only large economy which had seen a positive GDP growth even in the COVID times. So what are the challenges now that we've exited the recession and now that the GDP has showing a positive growth? The challenges is second COVID wave in Maharashtra. In the last few weeks, what we are witnessing is the news of COVID clusters emerging in industrial areas of Maharashtra. So there is clearly a second wave of COVID which can have a larger impact than the first wave. So these should be resolved or this should be controlled. The next challenge comes from polling in many states. We have seen that the Election Commission have given dates for Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Pondicherry, and in some other states. So what happens is during polling, many citizens will come to the polling stations to cast their vote. So there is a chance of COVID being spread during this election period. So what's needed? There is a need for increase in government spending. Only when the government spends more, there will be a positive growth in the industries and in the road and transport sector for now. Because now the private investment has come down largely because of COVID impact. This is the first need. Second, faster vaccine rollout. If the vaccine is rolled out fast and if more and more number of people are getting vaccinated each day, there is a less chance of COVID having a huge impact on the Indian society. So by faster vaccine rollout, we can save numerous lives and also result in GDP growth. Third, keep in check the third wave, as we've discussed earlier. Fourth, promote labor intensive sector. So during the COVID, we have seen millions of people, mainly in the informal sector, losing their jobs. So by promoting labor intensive sectors like textiles and MSMEs, there will be a real chance of creating numerous number of jobs and impact, and which would have a positive impact on the GDP growth. Our next article of today's discussion is emergency. So Article 352 of the Constitution states that President can proclaim emergency if he or she believes that there is a grave emergency exists to the security of India or to any part of territory thereof threatened, whether by war, external aggression, and armed rebellion. The third factor used to be internal disturbance. So what is emergency and why do we need it is, as we are a federal country, as we are having a federal structure, there is a division of powers between the central and the state governments. So during any emergency or any security threats to India, what happens is whenever the president proclaims the emergency provisions, there will be a consolidation of all the powers to the union. This will give the union more resources and more powers to execute and to save the country from external aggression and other threats. In the original Article 352, the President can proclaim the emergency under three conditions under Article 352. One is war, one is external aggression, and the other is internal disturbance. What happened was, in 1975, when Mrs. Indira Gandhi's election was set aside by Allahabad High Court, Mrs. Gandhi has proclaimed internal emergency using the provision of internal disturbance for proclaiming emergency in the India. So after she losing the next general elections and after having a new party in the power in 1978, we have seen 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, which was mainly intended to remove any vague provisions in the constitution in important articles. So this internal disturbance was later replaced with the term armed rebellion. So this is Article 352. What are the other emergencies the president can proclaim? He can proclaim emergency in a state under Article 356. This is famously called as President's Rule. Under Article 360, he can proclaim financial emergency. So these are the three types of emergency the president can proclaim under various constitutional articles. So our next article of the today's session is Himalayan Sero. So if you look into the Himalayan Sero, it looks like a cross between goat and an antelope. It resembles a cross between a goat and an antelope. What is significance of today's article is it was first time spotted in the Manas Tiger Reserve, which is in Assam. This Manas Tiger Reserve is in contiguous with Royal Manas National Park of Bhutan. So the significance of this Himalayan Sero being spotted is, first, it is spotted in Assam. It is seen in very far off the northeastern areas. It is listed as vulnerable in the IUCN Red List, and it is listed under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act. Under Wildlife Protection Act, Schedule 1, the Constitution provides the most significant protection to the animals and the plants included in this article. So, more about Himalayan Sero. They are herbivorous. They are typically found in altitudes, that is heights between 2000 to 4000 meters, which is 6500 to 13,000 feet. There are several species or several types of seros, and all of them are found in Asia. Prelims questions of today. Emergency under Constitution Article 352 can be imposed under the following conditions. Now, external aggression, war, internal disturbance. Which of the above statements given above is or are correct? So as we've discussed earlier, there was earlier, that is till 1978, there was a provision to impose emergency under this internal disturbance. But after 1978's 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, it was replaced with the term armed rebellion. So now only under these two circumstances can a proclamation be made under Article 352. So the answer is B. Second, consider the following. Previously assessed as near threatened, the Himalayan Sero is now being categorized as vulnerable in the IUCN Red List, and it is listed under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So which of them are correct? As we discussed, both are correct. Yes, it is listed as vulnerable now. Earlier it used to be near threatened in the IUCN Red List, and also now it is under the Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act, which provides absolute protection to those in this schedule. Tiger Reserve and states is Manas in Assam, is Kanha in Karnataka, is Bandipur in Madhya Pradesh. Which of the above statements is or are correct? Option D is the correct answer, because Manas, as we discussed earlier, is in Assam, but Kanha is not in Karnataka, it is in Madhya Pradesh. Bandipur is not in Madhya Pradesh, it is in Karnataka. Static question of today. Who among the following personalities offered individual satyagrahas during the Quit India movement? 1. Jawaharlal Nehru. 2. Vinoba Bhave. 3. Brahmadatta. 4th. Maulana Azad. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer will be B. Jawaharlal Nehru, yes, he was the second person who has offered individual satyagraha. Vinoba Bhave was the first. Brahmadatta was third. So option B is the correct answer. Previous year's question paper, we've taken a question from 2014. What are the benefits of implementing the integrated watershed development program? Prevention of soil runoff, linking the country's perennial rivers with seasonal rivers, rainwater harvesting and recharge of groundwater table, regeneration of natural vegetation. So, what are the benefits of this? The answer to this question is option C. Yes, it does help in prevention of soil runoff. It helps in rainwater harvesting. It helps in regeneration of natural vegetation. Let's come to mains practice questions. First, to ensure stability in the region, JCPOA, also called as Iran deal, should be renegotiated. And why US under Trump administration exited from this deal? Write it in under 250 words. Second, what are the various types of emergencies available under the Indian Constitution to the President? Explain. It is in 150 words. Thank you. This is the end of today's session.
Add-on solutions. Add-on desires.